the appointment. The moment Elena Torres pressed her hands against his shoulders, she felt something she couldn't explain. Not tension, not ordinary stress. Something deeper, something cold. Like pressing her palms against stone that had forgotten what warmth felt like. She had been a massage therapist at Serenity Wellness Spa for 3 years. She had touched hundreds of backs, worked through thousands of knots, and heard every kind of sigh relief could produce. She knew bodies. She understood what stress looked like when it lived inside muscle and bone. But this man was different. His name on the appointment book read simply, V. Moretti. 4 p.m. Private suite. The receptionist had handed her the file with slightly trembling fingers. He requested you specifically, by name. Elena had frowned. Me? I've never seen this client before. He said someone recommended you, that you're the best. Elena should have felt flattered. Instead, she felt the smallest flutter of unease in her stomach. She pushed it away. A recommendation was a good thing. It meant her reputation was growing. The private suite at Serenity Wellness was reserved for their most exclusive clients. Soft lighting, sandalwood incense, a massage table draped in Egyptian cotton, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city skyline, now painted in shades of amber as the sun began its descent. When V. Moretti walked in, Elena's first thought was that he looked ordinary. Handsome, yes, mid-40s, silver threading through dark hair at his temples. A face that might have been carved from marble. Strong jaw, straight nose, eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He wore a simple black sweater and gray slacks. No jewelry except a thin silver watch. He moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who never wasted motion. Mr. Moretti? Elena extended her hand with her practiced, professional smile. I'm Elena. Welcome to Serenity. His hand engulfed hers. Warm, surprisingly gentle. But his eyes, those dark, depthless eyes, studied her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. Elena, he repeated, just her name. But the way he said it made it sound like something precious, something he was memorizing. Thank you for seeing me. His voice was low, measured, the kind of voice that never needed to raise itself to command a room. Of course. Please make yourself comfortable. I'll step out while you get settled, and we'll begin whenever you're ready. She turned toward the door, but his voice stopped her. Elena. She looked back. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Something flickered behind his eyes, something almost like uncertainty. It was gone so quickly she thought she might have imagined it. Be honest with me today, he said quietly. I've been told I carry tension. I want to know where. Elena smiled softly. Honesty is part of the job, Mr. Moretti. Vincent, he corrected. Please. The shadows he carried. Vincent Moretti was not a man who asked for things. He took. He demanded. He built an empire on fear and silence and the understanding that his word was law in every corner of this city that mattered. He was 53 years old. He had buried his father, his mother, his brother, and the only woman he had ever loved. He had survived 3 assassination attempts, 2 betrayals by men he called family, and 1 night in a warehouse where he had made a choice that still visited him in dreams he never spoke about. In the world he ruled, weakness was death. Softness was suicide. And emotion, real emotion, was a luxury he had surrendered decades ago. His organization controlled shipping routes, construction contracts, and political offices. His name was whispered in courthouses and police precincts. Men who had ordered others killed trembled when they sat across from him. Vincent Moretti was the most powerful man no one officially knew existed. And yet, 3 weeks ago, he had been walking through the financial district when he passed a small wellness spa tucked between a coffee shop and a law firm. Through the window, he had seen a young woman with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was laughing at something someone had said, and her entire face had transformed with joy. He had stopped walking. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Not because he wanted anything from her, though he would eventually understand that he did. He stopped because he couldn't remember the last time he had seen someone laugh like that. Freely. Without calculation. Without fear. He had watched her for 7 seconds. Then he had continued walking, his expression unchanged, his heart heavy with something he couldn't name. That night, he had ordered his men to find out who she was. Her name was Elena Torres, 29 years old, daughter of Maria Torres, a seamstress, and the late Roberto Torres, a carpenter who had died when Elena was 16. No criminal connections, no debts, no boyfriend. She volunteered at a community center on weekends, teaching art to children. She was, by every measure Vincent understood, completely ordinary. And yet he couldn't stop thinking about her. The session began like any other. Elena worked in silence at first, her hands moving across his shoulders with practiced precision. She found the tension immediately. A wall of knots between his shoulder blades, tightness along his neck, rigidity in his lower back that suggested years of carrying weight that had nothing to do with physical labor. "You hold everything here," she murmured, pressing into a particularly stubborn knot near his right shoulder. "Most people carry stress in their necks. You carry it in your shoulders. Like you're bracing for something." Vincent said nothing. His eyes were closed. But Elena noticed his jaw tighten slightly. "This kind of tension doesn't come from sitting at a desk," she continued gently. "It comes from responsibility, from always being the one people depend on. You can tell that from touch? Bodies don't lie, Vincent. They tell stories. Yours is telling me that you've been carrying other people's burdens for a very long time." A sound escaped him. Not quite a laugh. Not quite a sigh. Something in between. "You're observant. It's my job." "No." His eyes opened, and he turned his head slightly to look at her. "It's who you are." Elena's hands paused. She wasn't sure why his words affected her. Clients said kind things sometimes. It was part of the dynamic. Vulnerability breeds gratitude. But the way Vincent spoke made her feel seen in a way she hadn't expected. She cleared her throat and returned to work. "Try to relax. We still have 40 minutes. "I don't think I know how." The admission was so quiet, so honest, that Elena's heart ached unexpectedly. "Then let me help you remember," she said softly. They didn't speak much for the rest of the session. But something shifted in the room. The silence became comfortable. Elena found herself working more slowly, more deliberately, pouring something beyond technique into her touch. And Vincent, for the first time in years, felt the iron grip around his chest begin to loosen. When the session ended, he sat up slowly. His shoulders moved differently. His face looked younger somehow. The deep lines around his eyes softened by something that might have been peace. "How do you feel?" Elena asked. He considered the question longer than she expected. "Light," he finally said. "I feel light." She smiled. A real smile. The kind that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Good. That's the goal." Vincent stood. He reached for his wallet, but Elena shook her head. You can pay at the front desk. I know. He pulled out a business card, simple white, his name embossed in black, and placed it on the table. If you ever need anything, Elena, anything at all, call that number. She looked at the card but didn't touch it. That's very kind, but please. His voice carried an edge now. Not threatening. Urgent. Keep it. Promise me. Something in his eyes made her breath catch. Behind the composure, behind the careful control, she saw it. Fear. Not for himself. For her. I promise, she heard herself say. He nodded once. Then he was gone. Elena stood in the empty room for a long moment, staring at the card on the table. She didn't know why her hands were trembling. The truth she couldn't unsee. Vincent returned the following week. And the week after that. Each session followed the same rhythm. Quiet conversation. Gentle touch. A gradual unwinding of the tension he carried. Sometimes they talked about nothing. The weather, her childhood memories, books she had read. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence. Elena began looking forward to his appointments in a way that confused her. He never flirted, never crossed lines, never made her feel unsafe. And yet, every time he looked at her, she felt something electric pass between them, something unspoken. It wasn't until his fifth visit that the truth began to emerge. She was working on his left shoulder when her phone buzzed on the side table. She ignored it, but when it buzzed again, and again, she glanced at the screen and saw 7 missed calls from her mother. I'm so sorry, she said, stepping back. My mother. She never calls this many times and less. Take it, Vincent said immediately. Family comes first. Elena stepped into the hallway and answered. Her mother's voice was frantic. Elena, where are you? There are men outside the apartment. In black cars. They've been there for an hour. They're watching the building. I'm scared. Elena's blood ran cold. Mom, stay inside. Lock the doors. Don't answer for anyone. I'm coming. No. Her mother's voice cracked. Don't come here. I don't know what's happening, but I'm afraid they're watching for you. The call ended. Elena stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. When she turned around, Vincent was standing in the hallway doorway. He was fully dressed. His face had transformed into something she didn't recognize. The warmth was gone. In its place was stone. What did she say? How do you? What did she say, Elena? His voice was different now. Commanding. Dangerous. The voice of a man who had ordered terrible things and never lost sleep. And suddenly Elena understood. The expensive private sessions. The bodyguard she had glimpsed waiting outside the spa. The way strangers seemed to clear a path for him on the street. The way her receptionist's hands trembled. The business card burning a hole in her pocket. Oh my God, she whispered. Who are you? Vincent took one step toward her. Just one. But it was enough to make her flinch. Pain flickered across his face. Pain and something else. Shame. I am exactly who you think I am, he said quietly. And I am so sorry. The world she never knew. They sat in the back of his car while his driver took them through streets Elena didn't recognize. Vincent explained everything. Not because he owed her an explanation. Men in his position explained themselves to no one. But because she deserved the truth. He was Vincent Moretti, the head of the Moretti family. His father had built the organization from nothing. His brother had been killed trying to leave it. And Vincent had spent 30 years becoming the most feared man in the city because fear was the only currency that kept his people safe. "The men outside your mother's apartment are not mine," he said quietly. "They belong to a rival, a man named Sergio Bianchi. He's been trying to find a weakness in me for years." Elena stared at him. "And I'm the weakness." Vincent's jaw tightened. "You were never supposed to be part of this. I was careful. I made sure no one followed me to the spa. But someone saw. Someone talked. And now Bianchi knows that I've been visiting you. So what does that mean?" "It means he thinks you matter to me." "Do I?" The question hung between them. Vincent turned to look at her. For the first time since she had known him, she saw no walls, no control. Just a man who had been alone for too long, looking at the one person who had made him remember what warmth felt like. "Yes," he said. "You do." Elena's mother was relocated that night. A team of Vincent's men, quiet, efficient, polite, moved her to a safe house outside the city within 2 hours. Elena spoke to her on the phone, reassured her, promised her everything would be okay. She wasn't sure if she believed it herself. "You can leave too," Vincent told her later, standing by the window of a penthouse she didn't know he owned. The city glittered below them, indifferent to the violence simmering in its shadows. "I have money, resources. I can send you anywhere in the world. A new identity, a new life. You would never have to think about this again." Elena watched him from across the room. "And you? What would you do?" "What I always do. Handle it." "By killing people?" He didn't answer. That was answer enough. Elena walked toward him slowly, stopped when she was close enough to touch. "Is that who you want to be?" Vincent's eyes were filled with exhaustion. Decades of exhaustion. The kind that sleep could never cure. "I don't know who else to be," he admitted. "This is all I've ever known. Violence, power, control. I thought they would fill the emptiness inside me. They never did." Elena reached out and placed her hand over his heart. He froze. His entire body went rigid. No one had touched him like this in 20 years. "You came to my spa because you were looking for something," she said softly. "Not a massage, not relaxation. You were looking for someone to see you, the real you, the one buried underneath all of this." A shudder passed through him. "I see you, Vincent. I see the man who carries everyone else's weight. I see the loneliness. I see the guilt. And I'm still standing here." A sound escaped his throat. Something broken. Something human. "Why?" he whispered. "Because you're not beyond saving. Nobody is. But you have to want it. You have to choose differently. The choice." Sergio Bianchi made his move 3 days later. His men ambushed one of Vincent's warehouses. 4 of Vincent's people were injured. 1 was killed. A man named Paolo, who had worked for the family since he was 18 and had 3 children waiting for him at home. Vincent received the news in silence. Elena watched his face transform, watched the coldness return, the mask snapping back into place. "Vincent." He didn't respond. "Vincent, look at me." Finally, he turned. His eyes were empty, the eyes of the man the city feared. "You know what I have to do," he said flatly. "Yes, I know what you think you have to do. If I show weakness now, more people die. That's how this works. That's how it's always worked." Elena stepped closer. "And when does it end? Another killing, another retaliation, another war. When does it end, Vincent?" It doesn't. Then what are you fighting for? He had no answer. Elena took a shaking breath. I know you think violence is the only language they understand. Maybe you're right. Maybe in your world that's true. But you told me you wanted to feel something different. That you came to me because you were empty. She reached up and touched his face. Killing Sergio won't fill that emptiness. It will just make it deeper. And one day, there won't be anything left inside you at all. What Vincent did next would become legend in the underworld. He didn't retaliate with bullets. He didn't send assassins. Instead, he called a meeting. Every major figure in the city's shadow economy gathered in a neutral location, an abandoned church on the outskirts of town. Vincent arrived alone, unarmed. The other families watched with suspicion. Sergio Bianchi watched with barely concealed triumph, certain that Vincent was about to show weakness. But Vincent didn't show weakness. He showed strength. He stood before them and declared that the old ways were dying. That endless war had made them all rich but left them hollow. That their children grew up without fathers and their wives grew old waiting for phone calls that never came. He proposed a truce, a division of territories, a structure for resolving disputes that didn't involve bloodshed. I'm not a good man, he said quietly. I've done things I will never be able to undo, but I'm tired of building empires on graves. I'm tired of looking in the mirror and seeing someone I don't recognize. The room was silent. Sergio laughed. You've gone soft, Moretti. Because of a woman? The great Vincent Moretti, brought to his knees by a massage therapist. Vincent met his eyes calmly. She showed me what I had forgotten, that we are more than the worst things we've done. That change is possible, even for men like us. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Not everyone agreed. Some never would. But enough of them, tired of burying sons, tired of watching their families shrink, saw wisdom in his words. A fragile peace was born that night. And Sergio Bianchi, who rejected the truce and vowed to destroy Vincent alone, was found dead 3 days later, killed by his own lieutenant, who had lost 2 brothers to the endless wars and wanted no more blood. The quiet after. 1 year later, the spa was different now. Serenity Wellness had expanded into a full wellness center, funded by an anonymous investor. Elena trained other therapists, developed programs for trauma survivors, and spent her weekends exactly as she always had, teaching art to children at the community center. She lived in a small apartment with exposed brick walls and morning light that flooded her bedroom. On the windowsill sat a single framed photograph. Her father, smiling, holding her as a baby. Most mornings, she woke up alone. But some mornings, she woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of quiet movement in her kitchen. Vincent had stepped back from the day-to-day operations of his organization. He would never be completely clean, the past couldn't be erased, but he had handed control to a nephew who shared his vision of a different future. A future where power didn't require cruelty. He split his time between the city and a farmhouse upstate that Elena didn't know he owned until she found herself standing in its kitchen on a cold December morning, watching him cook breakfast. "You're terrible at this," she had said, laughing at his attempt to flip pancakes. "I built an empire," he replied drily. "I can conquer pancakes." He couldn't. They were burned. They ate them anyway. On the anniversary of their meeting, Vincent gave Elena a gift. Not jewelry, not money, not anything his old self would have chosen. It was a painting, a small watercolor of a woman with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, laughing freely, surrounded by children's drawings. "I had someone paint this from a photograph," he said quietly. "One I took without you knowing. It was the moment I fell in love with you, Elena. Before I knew your name. Before I understood what you would mean to me." Elena held the painting with trembling hands. "You were laughing," Vincent continued. "Just laughing. Like the world hadn't touched you. Like joy was the most natural thing. And I thought," his voice caught, "I thought, I want to be worthy of standing near someone who laughs like that." Elena set the painting down carefully. Then she crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him. "You are," she whispered. "You are the redemption we find." They never married. Neither of them needed a ceremony to know what they were to each other. Elena continued her work. Vincent continued his quiet transformation, funding schools, establishing programs for young men who might otherwise have followed his path, making amends in ways that would never erase his sins but might soften their edges. Some nights, the old darkness still visited him. He would wake gasping, haunted by faces he couldn't forget. Elena would hold him without speaking, her hand over his heart, until his breathing slowed. "I don't deserve you," he would say sometimes. "Maybe not," she would reply. "But I'm staying anyway." Years later, when people asked Elena what she saw in him, this man with shadows in his past and blood on his hands, she always gave the same answer. "I saw someone who was lost, and I watched him choose to find his way back. That's the hardest thing a person can do. That's the bravest thing a person can do." She would pause, smile. "Everyone deserves someone who believes they can be more than their worst day. I just happen to be his someone." The city still whispered Vincent Moretti's name. But now the whispers told a different story. Not of a man to be feared, but of a man who had walked through fire, touched bottom, and somehow, against all odds, found his way back to the light. Because of a woman who saw past the monster to the man underneath. Because of hands that knew how to heal. Because sometimes salvation arrives wearing a simple uniform, working an ordinary job, carrying an extraordinary heart. And sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is also the one most desperate to be saved.